This episode may contain material which may be unsuitable for some listeners.
Peter Nygard.
This is the story of Peter Nygard, an abusive, tyrannical sex criminal who was once lauded as an international playboy and business tycoon.
It's important for me to make a contribution to everybody's life in this stage of my life.
He's described as one part Liberace, one part Hugh Hefner, and one part Fabio. With his flamboyant fur coats, his open shirts, and his long, flowing blonde hair. He ran a Canadian-based clothing enterprise worth close to $1 billion. And at one point, he was one of the richest men in Canada, with close to a half dozen multi-million-dollar properties.
You are absolutely working for the finest company there is in this industry. Congratulations. Peter Nygard.
But today, at 83 years old, Peter Nygard is behind bars. An inmate, locked up in Canada, serving an 11-year sentence and awaiting several more trials there, and a criminal case in the United States. Then a class action civil suit with 135 alleged victims at last count. Nygard was first arrested back in 2020 on multiple charges of violent sex and sex in Canada, in the United States, and at his luxury resort in the Bahamas. But his extraordinary history of alleged crimes began long ago, as far back as the 1950s, and they went virtually unchallenged for more than half a century. Nygard's victims are estimated to number in the thousands, with some accusers as young as 14. The accusations against Nygard have been compared to those against Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, and Bill Cosby. But Nygard's numbers dwarf all of theirs combined. And you'll find out why. What made him into this monster as the details of Nygard's crimes unfold. Peter Nygard's story has never been told from the inside like this. But you're about to hear details that no one's ever heard before, because I grew up with him. I've known Peter Nygard since I was a kid. My mom's known him half of her life. To me, he was Uncle Peter. His niece Angela was one of my childhood best friends. In her teens, Angela became a Nygard employee and worked for Peter on and off for 30 years. Why on and off? Angela was subjected to decades of his unbearable abuse. Psychological abuse, workplace abuse, and financial abuse, not unlike hundreds of his employees worldwide. Angela is speaking publicly for the first time about what life with Uncle Peter was like, the sex cult in which she grew up, the volatility and explosive anger, and the sick lessons that he made normal in their family. Simply put, Angela is opening the floodgates and shining a light on how Peter Nygard became the monster that he is today and what he did to so many people along the way. Together, we're telling Angela's story, the story of Uncle Peter. Peter Nygard.
We do the real people. That's our marketplace. You will not find another product as competitively priced as ours.
You're listening to Uncle Peter, a Drop Dead Serious podcast. Hey. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
I know this isn't comfy. You know, this isn't like our normal girl talk.
Right? I'm a little nervous.
I know it isn't easy, so we'll just kind of go through our lives.
It's a tough story.
My name is Angela Dyborn, and Peter Nygard is my uncle.
You're my lifelong friend.
40 years, isn't it? About 40 years, I think, that we've... More.
More.
Yeah,
Yeah,
45.
I think we met at 15 or something.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. So it's weird. It's an odd conversation, but I have to be a journalist, and I really do want to tell your story, and I think you're ready now to be able to talk freely, having kind of been harnessed.
Yeah, no, I think the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years now, have really been... I've been in a place where I need to tell my story, and I agree with that. And if anyone I can want to tell it to is you.
So let's just go back to the very beginning. What's your earliest memory of Peter?
Oh my gosh. Earliest memory, quite young. Falcon Lake, the cottage where he had his summer cottage, going to visit with my parents. This incredible man, at the time, seemed the hero of our family, showing up at family events. I thought he was a movie star, looks, and just this really amazing person, larger-than-life character, being the hero of our family. That was before he started traveling a lot. When his business, the clothing business, started building and growing, then he was away a bit more. But for the most part, in the summertime, he was in Canada and around Manitoba. But then by the time we were about 8, we started going to the Bahamas for Christmas, and to go because my grandparents would go to the Bahamas at Christmas. As his family started to grow and grow and grow, we'd start to have our cousins, like our different cousins would be there. So then we'd spend longer blocks of time with him.
I do remember another big part of the Uncle Peter in my life was our graduation. This is the nice side of Peter. This is the side that some people really celebrated and saw and trumpeted. He gave you and me his Excalibur for graduation night so that we could show up in an Excalibur. I just remember that being like massive.
Yeah, oh no, it was. And that was a big thing for him to do.
Really?
For us, for a family member, for somebody else, if it was a girlfriend or somebody else to take the car, go to Polo Park.
Oh, really?
But for us to get it, I mean, there was very rare.
It's so gross. Wait a minute. I thought like he would be so thrilled to have a family member with a graduation, but you're saying the women in his life, the girls in his life, whatever he called them back then, they could have the car anytime. You, on the other hand, only once in your life.
It was a special, yes. It was a wonderful moment.
We did not get the car.
No, we did not get the car.
We got it for the evening. Talk to me about how other people regarded him in those early days.
He was a hero. There was articles about him every other day. There was, there'd be newspaper pieces. There'd be things on television. There would be people wondering, oh, you're Peter Nygard's niece. What about this? What about that? Everybody, he was worshipped. People, especially in Winnipeg, because he came from, Winnipeg was the epicenter of all of this.
I still recall back in the 90s, we both would roll our eyes. Like, no, we never justified Peter's morality and his choices. We just thought he was gross, but nothing more.
Yeah, it was embarrassing, right? Like,
it was embarrassing. He was his behavior was embarrassing.
And his everything, like the things he'd say were embarrassing. Yeah. I was proud. I was so proud of the company because I think you have to separate.
There was a lot to be proud of.
Separating that entity of Nygard and the company that he built, and Peter, the person.
Peter Nygard.
Welcome to everybody, all my special friends. And of course, more important than anything, the customer.
He is a designer of international fame. He is our #1 designer at Dillard's today, Mr. Peter Nygard.
What a welcome. Can you imagine a police escort? Go out there and buy a lot of Nygard products. Make this store #1 store.
As Nygard's business empire grew, so did his crimes, in plain sight. Under the guise of his clothing brand that sold in department stores like Dillard's and Sears, Nygard lured in women by promising them modeling contracts and telling them he'd make them famous. And women believed him. He was powerful, with an international playboy image. He could offer them a future, so why wouldn't they jump at the chance? Nygard's name was everywhere, and eventually so were the women. He had women and models on each arm everywhere he went, even when visiting construction sites. And then came the wild parties. They were notorious, but as many women quickly learned, they were also a ruse. Dozens and dozens would say they were raped at those parties, either by force or while unconscious after being drugged. His executive offices, they weren't safe either. Women were often brought in alone for interviews or tours. But each of his offices conveniently featured a bedroom suite, right there in the middle. And that's where many would be sexually assaulted. To those on the outside, Nygard's victims were displayed as no different than his girlfriends or his dates, or aspiring models who even threw themselves at him willingly. They were always referred to as girls.
Yeah,
you know?
and I feel bad when I use that term because it is like, because they were women. But
we're different now.
Yeah.
We're a whole different generation now.
And just the constant flow of women through the day, for as long as I can remember, when I started getting involved in the business side, it was something that was just a normal. It was just something, that's just the normal thing that Peter does.
Did you guys think it was like the Playboy Mansion? Because I get an image in my head of Hugh Hefner having his business where he lived in the mansion, having his girls/women as a constant revolving door. Sometimes it's a party, sometimes it's just living. He really modeled himself after Hugh Hefner. He idolized him.
He idolized Hugh Hefner, and then he built his world around the rules and stuff that Hugh Hefner. You'd have your alpha girlfriend, you'd have your alpha female, you'd have women who'd sleep in different bedrooms depending on their status in your life. You'd have you'd have categories. I mean, he'd date gorgeous blonde. I mean, he had a type, especially early on, tall, blonde, long-haired, thin.
Like they were from Finland.
Yeah, like they were Scandinavian. But the women that actually kind of hung around a bit more, there always seemed to be like another dynamic. They were a bit broken or they were a bit needy. Mm-hmm. And then he did start to prey on very poor, very needy women who his persona and his life and what he had
was like a savior.
Yeah. You'd have categories of women. Did it happen all the time? No. Did it happen often? Yes. He sort of had his A-list, the best women, his most beautiful women. Hefner had that. He would, women almost had to audition to be in his, in his like
in his coterie.
In his world.
But he actually ended up becoming part of Hugh Hefner's inner circle. Like he connected with him, and he was part of that whole deal.
In the 70s, Peter was very much, I think he was like right in that inner circle. There was a bunch of men.
But eventually Peter Nygard's behavior became too much for even Hugh Hefner.
There was something that happened between them where Hef broke up with Peter.
Hef broke up with Peter in a letter.
Yeah. Hef broke up with Peter in a letter.
Effectively saying what?
Saying that basically Peter's lifestyle was just too much for Hef.
Even Hugh Hefner's brand couldn't stand what Peter Nygard was going to do to it if he associated with him.
Correct.
For Hef to kick you out of his inner circle saying your lore is too much. It's too much of a risk for me. It had to be pretty big.
Oh yeah. I kind of came across the breakup letter, cleaning out old papers one day, and I think my jaw dropped.
And then the letter back from Peter, it almost sounded like he was begging, well, if one day we can get back together. I'm actually holding Hugh Hefner's letter in my hands. It's Hef's breakup letter to Peter. It's dated October 31st, 1980. He writes, "As I've tried to indicate to you, the problem isn't any one particular incident or event as much as an attitude and lifestyle and the reputation that goes with it. That represents potential problems for me." And this is the letter that Peter Nygard wrote back to Hugh Hefner. It's dated a little over a month later, and Peter writes this. "I have found it somewhat difficult to accept your decision, especially since I could not trace any obvious reason for it. However, I do respect your wishes and will not pursue the matter any longer. I welcome our continued, though somewhat distant, friendship." And then Peter goes on to say that he looks forward to the day when, quote, "you are in a position to pursue the close and special friendship that was in the making." And Nygard closes his letter by offering to outfit Hugh Hefner's Playboy bunnies. Now, there's no doubt that Peter Nygard had similarities to Hugh Hefner as a womanizer and as an international playboy. But Nygard quickly crossed to sex criminal and sex trafficking, and his abuse wasn't just sexual. It was financial, ruthlessly financial, and verbal, blisteringly verbal.
Said to me that then it resides in the correct place. It is met with the staff who understands it, with the communication that is heard. You got that responsibility.
Here is a torrent of scathing insults unleashed on Angela and her husband. And this treatment was the norm for so many employees for decades.
Operator should not be able to find it. There's no way that should be readily available. So you also have the responsibility of teaching the next person who's in there training. What the was the picture all about? Me, Jesus Christ, you guys are ignorant. Whose fault are you now trying to make this to be?
John is saying that she registered her as that the name she gave was Kaya Brown when she came that time.
I heard you say that 3 times now.
So we invited Mokaya thinking it was a different person.
Well, yes, your thinking is wrong. Yes. You are always wrong. Yes. If we establish one system as one disclosure is, you guys are always wrong. This is just a perfect example of you being always wrong. You've never yet been right. And now you make it seem like whose fault this is now? What do you want me to come and clean up your mess? No. Holy Christ. Angela, it is chaotic the way you and Morton run that place.
So again, she gave Gianna the name Kaya Brown.
We'll dig deeper into other abuses of Angela, other family members, and his employees a little later on. But first, to get an idea of the kind of depravity in Peter Nygard's world, I asked forensic psychiatrist Dr. Julian Goger for his thoughts. And while Dr. Goger has never met Peter Nygard nor analyzed him, we talked about what Peter's behaviors might indicate.
That is how every business works, Angela. That is how my business is supposed to be working, Angela.
The stories of Peter Nygard's abuse extended beyond sexual. They were financial, they were psychological. I mean, the abuses that he leveled on people were almost unmeasurable. What are your thoughts professionally about someone who seems to cross all of these different silos of abuse?
Well, I'm not talking about Mr. Nygard. I'm talking about individuals who have that power and control. And the power and control may extend not just to sex, but to other walks of life. So it's an issue of a power issue as opposed to purely sex.
Can you dig a little deeper into that and how the power dynamic is so important when assessing how these crimes are committed?
In order to assess these kind of crimes, not only do we have to look at whether the person has a sexual deviation, and does the deviation extend to individuals who have an attraction, say, to younger females, younger males, or a particular genre of sexual activity. But then also one would like to assess the person's personality, and if the personality has strong narcissistic traits, then the behavior is about aggrandizement of the individual, and that's where the power and control becomes a bigger issue, and sex becomes yet one aspect of the narcissism that the person has.
With Peter Nygard, it seemed as though sex was critical to his survival, even, as long as 40 years ago, the notion that he just always had to have women around him and girlfriends and many girlfriends and was an avowed bachelor, would never marry. He had children with multiple women. What kind of person is like that? I mean, who are they that's their choice in life?
One aspect that one would want to look for are features of narcissism. And we also look at individuals who are psychopathic, who might want to control other individuals, who have defects in sense of morality. But unless one does an assessment, one doesn't know whether that individual has that trait, what we call a psychopathic trait. But narcissism is often a central feature of even the psychopath. So whether Mr. Nygard or any other individual like Mr. Nygard has these sort of behaviors, those are things that a forensic psychiatrist would like to look for.
Over the years, and maybe I dare say thousands.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair number.
That he has molested, sexually assaulted, or raped thousands of women.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be unreasonable.
Especially with the amount of women that he's been with in his life.
Do you think people just kind of were living in his orbit in constant fear of him? Whatever it was going to be, whether it was going to be a berating, a physical assault, a rape, a firing, a financial control mechanism. Like, did people just live in fear?
I think most people did. I think when you first met him, you'd think that you were the new shining star because he'd make you feel like there's nothing you can do wrong. And
Boy,
so,
he had charm.
Yeah, and that's that charm and the charisma.
I saw his charm. I never saw the other.
Yeah.
My mom, she saw his charm. He was so good to some people on the outside. But I see it now. It was like propaganda.
Peter Nygard. Mr. Nygard. He approached now international fashion mogul for one of the largest women's retailers in North America, Nygard International.
When you hear the name Peter Nygard, what is it you think?
I think of an old friend from a long time ago. I've known Peter for many, many years.
I asked my mom, Susie Lound, to sit down and talk with me for this podcast because my mom knew Peter well back in the day. She was friends with Peter's sister, Lisa. They were both professional working women back in the 70s when that was rare. I asked my mom about Nygard's charm back then.
No. I think that anybody would have said Peter was a very handsome, debonair, handsome, good-looking guy. And he also had a charm. He did. He had a charm. He could charm all those women into a disaster, a den of iniquity.
He had Hollywood looks, for sure.
He did.
And, sometimes money is the only charm you need.
Peter Nygard here at your Springfield
Yeah, he's really approachable. He's really nice.
He's very personable.
He's a sweetie. He's as nice as he can be. I just love all of his style.
What a handsome man.
But beneath all that charm, a predator was lurking. A predator with a massive ego. And a businessman laser-focused on making millions and making headlines.
Be Peter Nygard Day.
We're so happy to talk to the customers, ask you even some more. Now, what is it that we can do for you?
That your fashions are going to whip all the competition.
In the 1970s and 80s, he saw a market for women entering the workforce, like my mom and Lisa. They all needed clothes for the office, and he started making them.
I remember you describing your needs for a wardrobe when you went to work in the late 60s, early 70s, and how Peter recognized that and capitalized.
Well, I think he very quickly recognized that women were starting to get involved in the working world, and women needed to have the proper clothes. And a lot of women had no idea how to dress. They were used to wearing a house dress, some of them, and just sort of wearing very, very casual, relaxed stuff. And he realized that if they were going to go to the office, they needed to be appropriately dressed. And Peter was very smart that way because he did create a wardrobe that was acceptable in the office world and cheap and tasty.
And washable.
And easy to look after, to maintain.
Nygard's brand began in Canada and took off worldwide. The company's Canadian headquarters was first in Winnipeg and then moved to Toronto.
You see all the signs? It says Happy New Year to the world from Nygard. Right over there. See, look, see it up there?
But his world headquarters, where everything came crashing down in 2020, was true to form in the epicenter of bright lights and flash, Times Square in New York City. There were also offices near Los Angeles, in Marina del Rey. They called that one the Marina. And in all of his offices, Peter had a bedroom suite, his bedroom suite, right there, out in the open. The line was always blurred between his work and his play. Everywhere Peter went, he had ample opportunity to harm people. He raped and sexually assaulted women in Canada and in the U.S., but the scene of his most horrific crimes was the shadiest, sunny place on earth, Nygard Cay. It's located at the very tip of Lyford Cay, one of the richest parts of the Bahamas.
This is the only place that I really designed for me. All my designing has been for the business. Is that a concept right from day one where we should bring family together, parents, my children, loved ones. And it does that job well.
This is Peter's mother, Hilke Nygard. She's beaming with pride as she describes her son's home as a paradise.
Just love it, like a paradise. It has good imaginations.
So, describe Nygard Cay.
It was Robinson Crusoe, I think they said, meets Swiss Family Robinson. It was like a Disneyland architecture.
But it was a palace. I mean, it was massive.
It was massive.
We have 100,000 pounds of glass perched on top of these beautiful, huge, 2-foot diameter beams. I engineered this myself. It's got through 3 hurricanes. All of it is 360-degree view. That I do not put anything in the way of what is the most beautiful scene of all, the ocean.
I think the whole property was 4 acres. I think the house I'd heard was about 250, 300,000 square feet.
I never got to see it inside. I've seen the pictures. I did get invited a bunch of times. Yeah. I mean, he always said, come on over, take a look. If you're there, they'll let you in. I'm not there, but go. He's always really nice. But I just never had
to show it off.
We really enjoy ourselves together here. Kai and I are the best of friends, and I look so forward to coming here. And I hate so much leaving here, so I never want to leave.
Here's Peter and his son Kai Bickle Nygard describing how they work all the time at Nygard Cay.
We're very active here. We play volleyball maybe 4 hours a day, every day. What don't we do? Everything's here.
We do a lot of work here, too.
We do?
Yeah. Almost every kind of job you can think of out here. This whole place has been built pretty much by us and our team.
And there's a giant dining room table that seats like
50 at least.
50 people?
50 at least, yeah.
I didn't know it was that big.
There was a floor that raised into a dance floor and then made a second table, but
was there like Hugh Hefner-y grotto kind of hot tubby places?
Oh yeah, all the way through. All the way through. So there was a disco. There was a disco with like stripper poles and fans that blew up. But when you're dancing over top of the fans, they blew your skirts up like Marilyn Monroe style. There was kind of like a movie theater area. The pools, you could dive down naked and you could see like the naked mermaids would come down, and from the disco you'd see them. And then lots of little secret places. A place was designed, when you said grottos, it was designed to have little secret coves where you could sort of sneak away, and little spas and hot tubs. And so it was a place designed primarily for sex. It was more of a spectacle. I think people came to see it. I mean, there's a lot of pictures of celebrities there.
The A-list names who were pictured at Nygard Cay were epic. George and Barbara Bush, Bill Clinton, Robert De Niro, Michael Jackson, Robin Leach, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, Oprah Winfrey, Mel Gibson, Jessica Alba, and Anna Nicole Smith. Some of them were guests who actually stayed there. But most of them, like George Bush, they just came to take a peek, like a tour, because they were vacationing nearby. And in one of the better examples of Peter Nygard's propaganda moves, he called an extravagant bedroom at his resort home the George Bush presidential bedroom, even though George and Barbara never stayed there. And when President Bush gave Nygard his blue bomber jacket, the one with the presidential seal, Nygard wore it nonstop, and then had 6 more copies of it made so he'd never be without it.
It was in the Bahamas, came to see it, had heard about it, came to see it.
So fewer famous guests, more famous looky-loos.
Yeah. Yeah, and he also used it as a rental property. People, it was, I think, rented out at 45, 50 grand a night. So higher end people would...
Yeah, like Richard Branson's island.
Yeah.
You can rent his place out too. That gate, I always hear of it like, Jurassic Park. I've seen it from the outside. I never saw it go up and down, but like it's a Jurassic Park-like gate, right?
Yeah.
And it's been described as like the prison gate.
Yep.
Like if you were in, you weren't getting out. You weren't getting out unless Peter okayed it personally.
Correct.
Which is so screwed up,
Yeah.
When did it become like a prison and why?
It became like a prison because people would want to leave and go and explore the island. And Peter would all of a sudden wonder where his guests were, and they were all off the property.
He's ready to go to bed with them. They're not.
Yeah, he's ready to have some fun. He brought them down there. He paid for them to come down there. How dare they leave?
I brought you, I own you.
I brought you to the most amazing resort on the planet. Why would you want to leave? I own you if you're here. If I paid for it, you're
here for me.
Yep.
You're not here for Bahamas.
Yeah.
You're not here to go sightsee. You're here for me.
Yeah, we'll bring whatever to you. You're staying.
And then some say he just full-on imprisoned people, like took their passports, wouldn't let them leave, and that if they asked, the guy at the gate would say, you have to get Mr. Nygard's permission for this.
Even when I was working there, if I needed to leave, I came onto the property. If it was an event, I came on in a car. If I wanted to go back out to the grocery store, the gatehouse, even though they were technically working under me, the gatehouse staff, they'd still have to call up to Peter, say, can Angela go to the grocery store to go pick up some watermelon or whatever. And then he would say, then that would become a 2-hour lecture on why you didn't pre-plan for all the groceries you needed.
Right there at the gate waiting.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to Nygard Cay. We have anything you could possibly imagine. Trampoline out on the water, tennis courts, basketball court, beach volleyball, pool volleyball. Every Sunday we have a pamper party with manicures and pedicures and massages for our guests.
And when people are looking for the very best there is in the world, very unique experience in the world, this is what comes to Nygard Cay.
Describe for me the pamper parties. I mean, first of all, the term is so icky. I guess it didn't seem icky when they started, but what were they?
It was modeled after the Hugh Hefner Sunday parties. Watch movies, sports, pool.
Make out in the grotto.
Yeah, make out in the grotto. But have, just have a Sunday relaxation type of a day. Peter started small. Peter's pamper days in the beginning started off just with the same kind of concept.
The pamper party. The pamper party started originally when I wanted to spoil my own staff and wanted to give them a massage and a pedicure, etc. every Sunday. But as we started inviting some other friends, it grew and grew and grew, and it became 20 years ago. It already started to become a normal, most famous party of them all here in Los Angeles.
6, 8 girls, 2 or 3 that were living at the house, brought over a couple friends, and it was a very small, kind of a way to chill down for the day.
And he would provide manicures, pedicures, massages, food, and
volleyball, beach games.
Beach
games, just it was And then in the evening, karaoke and poker and stuff.
This is our nightly game of Texas Hold'em, where we play this every single night. And all these girls here, including Behera, out to kick their ass, those two guys over there. It's a great sport, mental sport. We love it. You don't have to bet if you don't want, you can just check. See, you had the higher kicker. Right. We got that goddamn ace diamond.
And then in the late evening,
in the late evening, they all went upstairs and they whatever. No, yeah.
I mean, it was literally orgies at night. He also had massive swinger parties at Nygard Cay, inviting dozens and dozens of people for days of naked debauchery. And the pictures show that it was mostly women wearing nothing but body paint and feathers, or wearing nothing at all.
There's like thousands and thousands of photographs, and people would come to some of the more
completely
risky
naked,
parties in the Bahamas and stuff. Yeah. And you'd leave with a little picture photo book of, eating dessert off a human dessert buffet.
So everybody has a little book ready for a few of the photographs here that we've taken. They worked very hard this morning. Darlene worked very hard this morning putting a few booklets together so you can go away with them. You already got some of you got them? Yeah, just to see so you can remember the place and treasure it with you. So again, thanks everybody for coming. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you, Peter. The best sexual performance goes to the woman who claims to have had at least 99% of those attendees here. So Sonia, come up here and grab the trophy for best sexual performance.
There are 3 women in one photograph, all naked, covered in dessert, and all these other naked women eating dessert off of them.
I mean, this is where I think a lot of the people in company were starting to get, and have always been upset, because that wouldn't just be his private business. He was so proud of it and had no boundaries on what was that personal business relationship that he'd send a camera crew from his Canadian offices into the Bahamas to record those parties and photograph those parties as if there was nothing wrong.
He didn't think there was anything wrong with this stuff.
Didn't think there was anything wrong.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Peter Nygard and I'm your host. Yay!
We kind of had 2 types of staff members. We had people that are more the executive assistant working on the business side, and then there's more like a social assistant.
I went through 3 entrances, so I do not know. I did not hear that not up the hill.
That's what I said.
Peter was putting so much pressure on getting
everybody.
new people and good-looking people to his parties that it just became, it was highly inappropriate.
I don't know where it was. That's why I was asking the goddamn question.
There's all this reporting that as women are coming into these parties, pamper parties or otherwise, you guys had to take down name, measurements.
The measurement part wasn't on the sheets that were used. It was a registration list, just like the Playboy Mansion or these other parties where you still know who your guests are. So it was definitely like a photo, name, contact information. It looked normal, by the way. It was just like a regular Sunday. It wasn't, like no one was sitting there going, oh wait, what are we engaging in? We shouldn't be doing this. It was just a normal Sunday when he was in town for 20, 30 years.
But it wasn't normal. The parties would continue late into the night, well after most of the staff went home. And behind those closed bedroom doors, it got dangerous and illegal, quickly. Peter believed he could do whatever he wanted, to whomever he wanted. And if the women he preyed upon didn't consent, he would go to any means necessary to make them comply.
That was kind of what went down when he was either in Bahamas or LA.
He wants these girls, get them to stay. If they won't stay, if you can't coerce them to stay, convince them however you want to, then drop some drugs in.
I think LA was a bit different. I think there was a bit of a different
mentality.
Yeah, different mentality, different group of people.
Wasn't
were
he
coming.
spinning through a lot of workers in the Bahamas too?
Oh.
Kind of like you're in, you're out. And so if you didn't comply with, this is the protocol, look the other way if some girl comes down from my room and is woozy or crying, or pay her off or whatever. Like it seems like it was a system he could manage in Bahamas.
Yeah, it was just such a different, such a different setup.
Sex is basically pyramid their abuse, and they abuse their victims and then turn their victims into traffickers.
And that was exactly what he was doing. And yeah, he was making his girlfriends find friends.
You know, he's alleged to have been going through the poorest neighborhoods in the Bahamas, which is a lot of the island, and getting some of the most desperately poor, young, and naive victims who would jump at the chance to go to the richest part of the island.
Yeah,
and then once they were there, they had absolutely no idea what was coming until he was on them.
And you think about Bahamas, people had to actually get out. This property was far from the poor neighborhoods. You were, 30, 40-minute car ride. People don't have cars.
As we talked and recorded this conversation, Angela shared dozens of images and videos and audio recordings with me. Most of the pictures she shared have never been seen before, and some of them can't be seen publicly without being heavily blurred. And then there was the collection of Peter Nygard with Anna Nicole Smith. Smith was a one-time Playboy bunny and model and actress who lived a hard life and died at the age of 39. I remember Peter telling me that he'd befriended her and that they were close. What was his relationship with Anna Nicole Smith?
He had an on-again, off-again relationship with her for a period of years, block of time. I think he would have liked her to have been more of a consistent A-list girlfriend. She ticked a lot of the boxes. Famous, blonde, Playboy connection, needy in terms of she was an addict. She had problems, so she needed Peter for that. He could be her hero or her savior.
He could get headlines with her.
He could get headlines. She came down to the Bahamas. She did some modeling for him, attended some of his parties as his date. Went down to the Bahamas a couple times.
Do you think they were sleeping together?
I think so. I think if he's flying somebody down there and bringing them back again and still involved with them after they've been down there.
Meaning if he flies you down and you don't have sex with him, he ain't flying you back.
Yeah, and you're flying yourself back. And you're flying yourself home even. But
did he do that?
Oh, he would. Yeah, there'd be girls that he'd fly down there and he'd figure out that I don't want to be here. I'm not into this guy. And he would make them find their own flights home. That was part of the...
That was standard.
That was pretty standard.
What a gentleman.
I know, right?
At some of these parties, there were women who arrived who were turned away, right? Because they weren't pretty enough. Like, they might come with a friend who was let in, but they would be turned... What was that like?
For him to see somebody that was too heavy or
he would say something to them?
He would embarrass them. He would call them names like pigs, like fat pigs. But he would be that they're ruining my party. That person's ruining my party by being here just because of their size.
It's not illegal, but it's disgusting and it happens.
And it was embarrassing, and I'm still so. It's one of the things that were the worst parts of the jobs. Like one of the worst parts. And then if he got eye contact with him, or if he was the one to then start to pitch a fit about somebody being there and start name calling, then it got really humiliating.
There's a long list of people who enabled Peter's behavior over the years, like employees, like from bodyguards, accountants, assistants, other women, even girlfriends, who ended up not only allowing this behavior, but bringing in other women too. Are they criminals or are they victims?
They're victims. I think they're victims. Because I think the enabling, it's not illegal to bring people into a party. It's not illegal to have multiple girlfriends. It's not illegal to be a playboy. It's not illegal to be a yes man and let somebody believe they're king of the universe.
Is that Peter Nygard? Bring up Peter Nygard, just stepping in the building. Oh, look at these parties, man. I ain't too fussy with the guys, just look at the girls. Woo!
But having multiple girlfriends is not where Peter Nygard stopped. There were women that weren't his girlfriends, women he drugged and held prisoner, either on one of his properties or in his executive offices. What do you make of the whole notion that he became very familiar with just a drugging pattern?
I do believe something was happening.
The reporting of the number of people who say they were drugged and that it was kind of a regular pattern, at least in the Bahamas, does it track with the guy that we are now learning so much more about, that this was the way he basically adopted a standard operating procedure?
Yeah, to an extent. To this day, yeah, for what we know about him now. It came onto our radar pretty late.
But it doesn't sound like it's unreasonable to believe that he finally kind of came up with a system that just worked unchecked, and it was kind of a foolproof way of getting what he needed.
Yep, if you would, yeah. If you would have asked me this 4 years ago, I would have said absolutely not, makes no sense. But now, it's looking,
in hindsight,
it's looking horribly true.
Yeah. The critics will say that you were his right-hand man, that you were in the company for, decades. How could you not have known, and that you would have had absolute knowledge or even been the person writing checks to pay off accusers and silence them?
In terms of checks, I have written checks. I had access to petty cash accounts and smaller incidentals out of the marina. But any of those bigger checks would have had to come from Canada or from a higher level legal department, but not anything that I would have had control over.
And you didn't have access to, say, Bahamas and Canada, Winnipeg and Toronto operations?
No, we operated it was like a silo almost. It was like we wouldn't even hear what was happening if there was an issue in either of these other places.
What do you think about the accusation that you should have known?
I think that's been a very an unfair one, because yes, I did know a lot, but everybody should have known then. If I should have known, every single person in the company should have known, every executive should have known, every person that sat in a budget meeting that saw the line items in his personal column of the different girls that he was paying a part of the payroll should have known.
Going back to the 90s, he was paying girls to be the dog walker, the mail collector, the fridge cleaner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did Peter ever ask you to pay someone off and silence them?
I've never been asked to pay somebody off to silence them. I have, we've helped people out. I've helped people with medical bills, but it wasn't in exchange for being quiet, this is going to happen. But it's been, this person is medically ill and needs to get a doctor, find a better doctor, pay her bills. This mother of one of his kids needs her electrical bills. They've been shut off. You need to pay that. So
you were regularly tasked with
making payments
and caring for people, but you were never asked to send a check to this girl, and when she gets it, tell her, don't say a word.
Yeah, no, with a contract, because those don't say words would normally come with a contract.
That would
I'm not
be
going to say a word.
Yeah.
But no, but was it that so-and-so's mother needs whatever, and one of his girlfriends, that happened all the time.
In telling the Nygard story from Angela's perspective, it's important to understand that Angela herself was a victim. Not everyone will believe that, but it's important to know how Nygard abused his employees and his family, and Angela was both. We'll get deeper into the kinds of abuse that she suffered under Nygard all through her life, as the story of Uncle Peter unravels. But outside of Nygard's abuse, she was publicly vilified in the press for his behavior, for being in Nygard's inner circle. She was even called an accomplice. She was sued by a victim and ostracized in her own community. So were her daughters. And you'll hear much more about all of that, plus the inner workings of Nygard's family and the sex cult they lived in from a very young age. Uncle Peter's morals, or lack thereof, that was always normalized, never questioned. It was Peter's way or else. Everyone else was wrong or out for a payday.
Yes, you are always wrong. Yes. If we establish one system and one disclosure is, you guys are always wrong.
Angela was taught that women were to look and behave a certain way, physically and sexually. and she herself was 3 times as a teenager. In the third assault, she was impregnated at 17 by a 35-year-old married man. And even now, 40 years later, I have to remind her that too was a sexual. Are you comfortable talking about that, by the way, the sexual that you went through?
I can, yeah.
Do you think, like, the father of your oldest child was 35 when you were 17 and he got you pregnant?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it was like, do you think that happened to you because of the normalcy of sexual deviance as you were growing up?
For sure. Absolutely, for sure. Yeah. Just how glamorized and how glamorous it was to be out at nightclubs with older men and try to look sexy and using sex as a tool to get a man. And very much so. Like,
because I remember being like confounded by the fact that you were with that guy.
I've learned, through all the stuff with Peter and everything going on there, I had to start to really look in the mirror and look at some of the things that I've been through.
So maybe you started to realize that a lot of the things you'd been through in your life weren't normal.
I've blocked a lot out. It only, I blocked stuff out. I had to, over the last few years, I've had to answer to a lot of things and sort of re-examine everything that I thought was something that's now
was normal.
I realize was not normal, because I didn't see myself as a victim. I saw myself as, it was my fault. I was there. I put myself in those situations. So that's why I think it took me so long also to really start to look at Peter's victims and say, wait, it wasn't their fault for being there. It wasn't their fault for believing in a model and contract. It wasn't this is all Peter's fault.
Yeah.
It's all Peter's fault.
What don't people know about Peter in this last phase of his life?
I think they don't realize that he's lost his mind. I don't think they realize.
Like literally, that's not, you don't mean figuratively. You mean he truly
literally.
is mentally ill.
I mean that and I think he's been mentally ill for a long time.
A mental illness that destroyed his family, his business, and the lives of so many women. Remember at the beginning of the show when I introduced you to Nygard? I mentioned there's a class action lawsuit against him. Greg Gutzler is the attorney representing those victims.
Tell me in the best sort of summary you can what you know about Peter Nygard.
I know that he built an empire and he used the corporate machinery. He used people around him. He used psychology. He used manipulation. He used fame and power to get what he wanted. It wasn't always about sex, but it was about dominance. It was about getting what he wanted. It was about competition.
Coming up on the next episode of Uncle Peter, 135 stories and counting. Women from 14 years old to their mid-70s. The violent tactics that he'd used to satisfy his deviant ways, his obsession with feces during sex, and the mess that he often left behind for the staff to clean up. What could possibly turn a man into a monster like this? Turns out Nygard had his own family secrets. Secrets going all the way back to the 1940s, when he was a boy.
A story that's emerged about Peter Nygard's background, that he was molested or potentially even sexually assaulted as a young boy. And the story that was told in the family was that he was forced to go under a woman's skirt. And I know you can't diagnose Peter Nygard, but generally speaking, if someone is as a boy, is that some kind of an explanation for having sexual deviance later in life?
And if that act is perceived as a humiliating act, but was also sexually arousing, then the person might seek out sexual acts later on in life that are degrading to the individual, but also finds them arousing. So you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out if an individual had those experiences, what might be driving those behaviors.
Behaviors further revealed in the next episode of Uncle Peter.
You've been listening to Uncle Peter, a Drop Dead Serious podcast. If you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, please call your local sexual hotline.